Hello again, welcome back to another Let's Talk. This time we're talking Star Wars games, and we have a lot of ground to cover. I cannot hold this video to be like a history of Star Wars games or anything like that because I don't have the time to research in depth every Star Wars game, but I'll give you some insight into the first few years, and we're going to talk about some of the newer stuff and including some of the stuff coming out, as you can see on the screen here. So let's just talk for just a second where it all began. And you would think, okay, and this is I'm going to utilize Wikipedia and IMDb and all kinds of things because we're talking about stuff that came from way back, and even all the knowledge in the world can't be contained in one single place for some reason. So let's just use all the resources we have. And I don't like relying totally on Wikipedia because people can go in and change it and pretty much make it say whatever they want. So, but you would think, because a lot of people's first experience with Star Wars games came from this right here, this arcade. It was released in 1983 by the Atari Company on a stand-up or a sit-down version, and I lost a lot of quarters to this. X-wing fighter simulator is pretty much what it was. You started out the battle in this mode. You played against TIE fighters. You fought TIE fighters, and then you go to the, let's see. Well, it's not going to have pictures, but then you go to the surface of the Death Star where you attacked the turrets, and you tried to blow up some turrets from the surface, and then you did the trench run, and it was a great simulator game for its time. Even with the see-through exterior of your X-wing and the TIE fighters and the Death Star, it was basically just lines. But for 1983, this was a big deal. Okay, even though you look at Mario and you're thinking, well, that come out in 1980, or Donkey Kong rather, come out in 1981, and it had better graphics. Well, to some degree it did, but let's face it, not everything was Nintendo. Because here's the difference, okay? Atari and Nintendo. Atari was the first game company to come along that I don't know how to say that they really did not invest into the graphics as much as they invested into the developing of the system. So that's pretty much what their goal was. Whereas Nintendo invested in the graphics, which is why Nintendo still exists today, and Atari has been they are what they are. I really don't know exactly what the status of the Atari company is to this, today. It doesn't really matter to Star Wars games. But when you look at what they developed, Atari was looking at the system, the underlying way of developing, while Nintendo was focused on the graphics and the gameplay. And that's why you have such a vast difference, and why Nintendo prospered, because that's what people notice. They see what they go by what they see. And plus, Atari was only second in line to creating video games because this was the first experience that most people had with Star Wars in a video game. It was Empire Strikes Back. You see, the release of Empire Strikes Back had come in 1981. And this game for Atari, for the console, was released in 1982. And you are seeing the extent of the gameplay, except for the end, where the AT-ATs actually reach the base, which is where you launch from. You don't. There's nothing on the map to tell you where the base is or how close they're getting or nothing. And let me tell you, I kept destroying AT-ATs when I was playing this game and thinking, okay, well there'll be another level where I get to do something else like Pitfall or something, where I go to Dagobah and it'll be a little bit like Pitfall or something. And no, this is it. I loved this game because it was Star Wars. You have to understand, I love Star Wars like, or I did. I'm not going to say I do to this day, but in my childhood all the way up through my teenage years, even, I loved Star Wars like most people love football. Okay. It's just my jam. Star Wars is where I got the, 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 the majority of how I view life, if you would. Um, and so this was what I had. I still have this game in Atari form. I don't even have an Atari that works, but I still have the game. Um, and I don't know. I'm sure people are selling this on eBay for like a couple $100 or some craziness, but not me. I don't have the box or none of the other stuff. I just have the game. Um, and it's still, put up somewhere. Probably not in a way that would be advantageous to keep it in a functioning state or whatever. I try to keep it in a controlled environment, but I mean, but I still have it, and this was my first experience to Star Wars video games, and even though this is all it was at the time, when if you look at some of the game releases at the time, we're talking about Tank and Pong. Look at all the color it had. Tank and Pong had no color. There was a couple of flashes of color on the screen, and that was it. You had a black background and white lines, and so this was a big step for most video games. And then you turn around and go in the arcade, at the mall, and you see this thing, and you're just like, oh man, I want to play the simulator because now I get to actually pretend to be in the X-wing. And so I lost a lot of quarters to this, not really knowing what I was doing. I was, let's see, 1983. I'm gonna tell my age. I was about 8 or 9. I don't know. Because it depends on when it actually came to the arcade in your area or whatever. Um, but yeah, so and then the Star Wars video game, which was actually the first console version video game. Okay, and this is the Famicom version, not the NES version. In other words, this is the game that released pretty much only in Japan, and it did not. Let's see if I'm remembering correctly. It didn't actually. No, this is more of the one that was just like the arcade style. Okay, let me click this one and see. Yeah, this one is more follows a sequence of going to Mos Eisley, and it was like a side scroller, um, and it was a different game. This was the 1991, so we're talking about for the NES. This is how long it took to port to NES, and in 1992 they come out with the Super Nintendo. So then you have like a year later, or let's see, did they come out with it the first year of the Super NES, or did yeah? No, they released it in Japan in 1992. Yeah, North America 1992. They released Super Star Wars. Okay, now the publisher for was still JVC, music industries, a music company. Um, but this is what LucasArts helped develop it. So it was a LucasArts film. a game. LucasArts had by this time become one of the biggest names in video game making because of its Star Wars based games. Now they also released a lot of games revolving around Indiana Jones. Never, never made a game as good as Pitfall in my opinion, but whatever. But anyway, um, and so they, oh wow, we jumped up to that's a few years later. But yeah, this was like the first game that followed Super Star Wars. Star Wars was Super Star Wars. The game before that, the 1991 game, I believe goes into, let's see. This is not saying that. There was one game that released as Star Wars, and it might have been the Sega version. I bet that's what it was. I bet it was. Let me pop over to IMDb and show you the. I think they had the Sega. Yeah, this one here. The Sega version had pretty much like Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi as elements in the video game. So when you played Star Wars on Sega, you played all three of the films because by this time all three films had been released. They released Empire Return of the Jedi in 1985. So it was just kind of odd, and so the Nintendo said we want all four games. We want the Super Nintendo, Super Star Wars. We want Super Empire Strikes Back, which released a year later, and then Super Return of the Jedi came in 1994. Okay, but what happened was consoles were on the way out as the personal computer rage started coming in, and as you can see right here, X-Wing became like the game that for a Star Wars fan, this is the reason you bought a PC. I mean, really, if it was not for all the other elements of personal computer stuff, information highway that it became, even then you could start finding other information stuff out. But no, this was it for gamers. This is why you go turn around and buy a video. A PC is this video game here, Star Wars X-wing. It was probably one of the, and if you want to, I'm gonna put a link up at the top right, right about here for. I think I have some X-wing gameplay, but if not, I will put a link to a video for X-wing gameplay because I tried to make one, but I think I had some hiccups with recording or with uh, the size of the screen or something with the way my port worked. But I still play this game. The controls are wonky. The joystick is weird because new joysticks work differently than old joysticks did. Back then, they were used to the 2-button joystick. You had a and a B basically at that time. And if you look all the way back to the Empire Strikes Back video game, you had one button. So, well, with some of the paddle controls, you had two buttons. They were literally the same button on most games. You pushed a button and you fired, and you pushed the other button and you fired. There was really no difference. But, and then somebody said, let's make the game like X-Wing, but make it more interesting. Let's add more elements to it. And that's what they did with Rebel Assault. Okay? Rebel Assault is a pilot game. This one, you're flying as a pilot, and technically his name is. Oh gosh, why did I forget his name all of a sudden? I have forgotten the pilot's name. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember. And that long pause is me uh, stuttering to a complete and total failing stop. My brain just fizzled and popped out some steam and stopped completely. Um, if I can remember the pilot's name, I'll come back to it. But in this one, you're just called rookie. You know, in this one, you're flying as a pilot that actually has a name. Um, and yet I don't remember the name of it. Um, and then I had this. I had all these games, by the way. I had this game, Star Wars Chess, and what it did, it was really kind of cheesy in the way it played. But if you watch, if you watch a video game about wizard chess, that's what this was. This was Star Wars Wizard Chess. If you're into Harry Potter crap, because um, because that's what this game did. When you moved your character next to another character, they would fight, and you would have a little fight sequence. Um, what you didn't see was this right here, because Luke and Vader were both kings, so they didn't ever fight in a lightsaber battle, but so it made it kind of lame in that regard. You would think they'd made them queens, so at least you'd get the battle scene, and then you'd have a like the emperor or something as the king or whatever. Um, and maybe there was, but there was something to the effect that Princess Leia was the queen, and so they were just like, well, we can't make Princess Leia not the queen, so we've got to. And I think Darth Vader somehow ended up being the queen to the emperor or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was pretty lame. But it was fun, and I lost some hours to that, in my childhood. And this is a relative childhood, because by this time I had graduated high school, or at least um, was in was going about to graduate high school. Um, I don't remember if I was still in high school here or if I had graduated. Tie Fighter came out, and by the way, I didn't actually get released. I didn't get actually introduced to Star Wars X-wing until after Star Wars Chess, whatever, chest. Um, but yeah, so I saw this one before I saw this one. I didn't know what this was, and then Tie Fighter came out, and this game was my jam, because by this time in my life, I wanted nothing more than to play an Imperial officer in a video game. When I was younger, I wanted to be Luke. As I got older, I wanted to be a stormtrooper. I wanted to be a Tie Fighter pilot. I wanted to be an Imperial officer, and I just thought, hey, all right, we get to play as a. And sure enough, the progression of this game and the things that they showed you in this game were a whole lot more fun. But the problem for me that I just couldn't overcome was the badging system, or the accomplishment screen that you got with X-wing was just still better, because you get a uniform that has all your patches and it shows you some really neat stuff, and this one didn't. It's hard to explain. It wasn't the same. But if you look at Imperial officer uniforms, it makes sense, because there's no way to kind of relate that. They're all very plain. Whereas this one up here, the accomplishment screen, was based around the some of the jackets that you see in the original Star Wars game. Well, then after Tie Fighter, or the same year, they released Return of the Jedi, Super Return of the Jedi, and it did okay. It was not the same level of release, like the people didn't buy Super Return of the Jedi like they did the first two. And I think the biggest mistake they made was they tried to release them year after year after year. And I realized they were developing them at the same time, so they were trying to get them to be in a release. But when they released these X-wing and all that stuff in between it, the Return of the Jedi just wasn't going to hold a candle on the Super Nintendo system, because everybody was getting PCs. They were just like, yeah, okay. And then they did Dark Forces. Now here's what Dark Forces was. This is the time in which, so, and I don't want to confuse two games, but they both came out about this time frame or this era of time. But I want to say it was Doom had been released in, I want to say, 1993 or 94, and there was a huge success behind it. The other game is escaping me right now, the name of the game. Uh, but that's what this was. Dark Forces was a Doom clone in Star Wars, okay? Because they had to have a more powerful stormtrooper, and this is when they created the Dark Troopers. You are a commando named Kyle Katarn, and you're an undercover operative, and your secret mission is to get to the plans of how the Empire is going to be attacking, with this secret force, and it becomes the Dark Troopers. And I want to say the Death Star play, yeah, retrieving the Death Star plans is a part of this game. Um, and then they come out with Rebel Assault 2, which was one of the best game releases they'd had, because this actually had more than just um, space battle. If I'm not mistaken, now I did not get to play this one as much, um, but I did have it. I just didn't play it as much, and I don't remember why exactly. But um, it became one of the best-selling games in Star Wars history, up to this point, anyway. And with the success, and this was Star Wars Arcade, I don't know where or what this was released about. I need to look it up a little bit more. Um, 32X, it was on a system, I think. Well, maybe it was on PC, and maybe I don't know. Because this might have been the PC release of Star Wars Arcade, where they re-released it and kind of updated the graphics. I think that's what that is. And they tried to make it, like the arcade but better. But by this time, people had been like, "Well, I've played, X-wing. Yeah, it's a lot more fun." And so it kind of didn't achieve what it was out to do. But there was this book that came out called Shadows of the Empire that gave insight into what happened with Luke and everyone, um, in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and introduced some characters that are, in the legacy character, or the, what do they call it, legends, or whatever they're calling it, when KK destroyed the Star Wars history. Um, the the it introduced a lot of characters that were extremely well written characters. The book was good. The characters were extremely well written. They had a I mean, the writer of this book had a good grasp of character development. Uh, Storytelling was okay. I, I enjoyed the book. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the book. I just mean the story itself was a little, I don't know. It just left something to be desired for me. I realized they had to come to the point at which Return of the Jedi continued on the saga, so you kind of knew where it was gonna go. But some of the things that took place in this one, uh, it was like, it. I don't know. There was a Han Solo character in the game that wasn't Han Solo, and so that had a lot to do with it. They had to have this rogue, um, to take the place of Han Solo because he was frozen in carbonite. And so they developed this character. I can't remember the character's name right now. Some of you Star Wars fans really already know it, but I can't remember. And then They come out with X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, which took me. I don't know about other people, but it took me into the realm of online gameplay where you played against other people, and you even on the teams you would work together or not. A lot of people flew solo in those games, and of course you got your butt handed to you. Um, on if you were on a team that everybody was just flying solo and not helping each other out. But it was very difficult if you didn't have comms, and back then very few people had microphones and headsets and things like that where we could talk to each other. If you had to say something, you had to type it out on the keyboard. You know, I don't know what this is. This is not Star Wars. It wasn't. There's nothing to do. There's nothing about this except for a parody. It's some kind of parody. I'm not looking at it because this is IMDb's stupid idea of a Star Wars game. But then they come out with Jedi Knight, which was Dark Forces 2. Yeah, that's when they really messed with the names in the Dark Forces series. But with Dark Forces 2, they called it Star Wars Jedi Knight. And what happened is, instead of you just being a guy running around with a gun, now you have a lightsaber. You're now force sensitive, and you develop some force sensitive powers and things like that. It was kind of neat. And it was a good take on change from the Doom um, subset, but the problem is it was still Doom. That was the real problem. Yoda stories. This was like a kid's. I want to say it was a kid's learning game. Yeah, tutorial game where it was an educational game, and then they come out with Masters of Terras Kasi. Now I had this on the original PlayStation, the first PlayStation console, and I played. This was what this took after, and what this basically was Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, whichever one you prefer to you know enjoy. But it was more of Mortal Kombat than it was Street Fighter. With Star Wars, it was Star Wars Mortal Kombat is what it was, and it was fun, but it was not refined. If you look at Mortal Kombat, uh, part of the thing that they did with Mortal Kombat that made Mortal Kombat so uh, good, if you would, was the fact that they didn't just use good graphics; they actually use actors in the video game. Now later they all become computer generated, but at the time they used the actual actor. And now, not with Street Fighter. Street Fighter, they were still cartoony. But again, with both of those games, they really excelled in trying to create a a good fighting game. And Master Terras Kasi was, let's pump this out while we can get people who want to play Star Wars, Street Fighter version, and that's what they did. Then they come out with Star Wars Monopoly. I actually played this one pretty regular, but it was okay. It was I can't remember what console or system or whatever I played it on. I want to say it was PC that I played this on, and it was Monopoly, and it wasn't wonderful. It was okay, but then I found this game, and now I am a lover of strategy games. Okay, tactical strategy, that kind of game. And this game was my cup of tea. I still play it to this day. I don't play it to be the best at it. I play it to enjoy it. And I can go in and rename my ships and do all these different things. It was just something that I really enjoyed. I like doing my best to create a galaxy of very similar to what the movies were like, but none of the names of the planets were actually right. The sectors were all wrong, and people complained about all that. And I'm just like, I don't care. It's enjoyable, and I still play this game. It is tedious, it's long, and it's not something you just sit down and play through like you can some other games. Then they come out with a release of Jedi Knight, Mysteries of the Sith. It was an add-on, one of the first add-ons for Star Wars that I know of. And then they did Rogue Squadron, which was more of a, it was almost a simulator, almost a simulator, but it was a follow along simulator, if I remember it correctly. And it reminded me of like Star Fox, except with better, with better graphics. But what they did with this, I mean, it was much later than Star Fox was released. I mean, it released in 1998, but that's kind of what it reminded me of. It reminded me of Star Fox. And maybe there's something else that's actually a better comparison for this one. But and then they did these Droid Works where you could make droids. This was another LucasArts educational game. Millennium Falcon CD-ROM play set. I I don't know, but I remember that around this time they were coming out with these games that were like they did the Starfleet Technical Manual and the USS Enterprise Technical Manual, and they were doing that for Star Trek, and you could literally walk around the halls of the Enterprise and interact with some of the things, and it would tell you stuff about it and all that other stuff. And I feel like that might be what that is, but I never had it, so I don't know. And then one of the first real newer version games when they really started trying to release games to parody movies aside from Atari. Now, they tried it early in the 80s. E.T. was the flop that stopped all that for a while. And then NES started doing it again. And this was the first major, I ain't going to say the first major, this was a major release for how they parodied the movie again in 1999. Well, then they come out with X-Wing Alliance, and it because that people wanted episode 1 stuff. They wanted the Republic era stuff, and this game took you back into the era of the Civil War, which was Luke Skywalker and all them. So it didn't do the best. Now me, I loved it, but I didn't. By that time, I was out of the simulator scene. I was still playing, like I said, Rebellion. And I played it religiously, and I was looking for more strategy based games. So then they did the Gungan Frontier, which was a tutorial type or a educational type game where you actually bred animals. Don't get me started. And then they had the racer game. This was a racer game. It was based around like Mario Kart and all that kind of stuff. Mario Kart had been out for a while. I think they were on Mario Kart 3 or 4 by this time, or maybe even further in than that. And so they tried to expand on the racer, and that's it was neat. I didn't play it but a little bit. I do have it on PC ported, but I just I haven't played it much. Um, but it was fun. It was a fun little racer, but it was a Star Wars racer. And then you've got Force Commander, and of course this was the one I was like, oh yay, they're coming out with another uh, strategy based instead of this is more of a tactical based combat system game. Yay, this is going to be awesome. It's like Age of Empires for Star Wars, and that's almost exactly what they tried to do, and it wasn't wonderful. It was okay, but it wasn't wonderful. They created it in sections where you could either be the Empire or the Rebellion, or you could be the Republic and the Separatists, and that was how they first created it. And then they expanded on it, I think, and they finally expanded on it and created other factions where you could be like Hutts and Gungans or something. I don't quote me, but it was okay, but it was lacking. Um, I don't remember Star Wars Demolition at all. Um, so I can't comment on it. I know it was released. I do remember it being released. I just don't. I have no recollection of it. The actual game. Then Starfighter, which they come out with, which was one of the first big console release Star Wars simulator games. Really, yeah. Okay, if you go all the way back to we go all the way back to Star Wars Atari. Sure, that was what that one was. But no, this was a major new release version. Then they did Jedi Power Battles, which was basically yet another version of a fight game, if I remember correctly. And then they did the Learning Center games. They did the more educational games. Rogue Leader, which was Rogue Squadron 2. Okay, they tried to. It did not do as well as the first one. They were trying to I think they were trying to recreate the Rebel Assault with this, where they made a better version of Rogue Squadron, but I don't know because I didn't. Here's the thing: I did not have a GameCube. In case you didn't catch that information in my Mario game stuff, but so I didn't play a lot of games that come out on GameCube, and if I remember correctly, that's the pretty much the only game that has come out on for a while. I think they did a PC version, but by that time I was moving on to something else. Battle of Naboo, like I said, we're not going. I'm way over my time limit, so I'm gonna try to speed it up here. But they did Clone Wars. They did Obi-Wan, which was a really well received game. But Bounty Hunter was a well received game that I still to this day want to play, and haven't. Racer Revenge, I don't know, and then Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds, which was a combination of strategy and tactical, which was very, very much what I wanted with Rebellion. Where you move over to the planet, you attack over the planet, you do the starship battle, and then you can also have the ground assault version. And it was fun for that reason, but it didn't have the depth that Rebellion had. Rebellion, there were like I don't remember exactly how many, but there were like 100 star systems, whereas Galactic Battlegrounds there was maybe 20 or 30. And then they did Jedi Starfighter, which was basically a sequel, even though they wouldn't necessarily say it. It was a sequel to Starfighter, except you flew a Jedi fighter. And I'm going to have to stop and make this into two parts. That's just all there is to it. So, what we're going to do is we're going to release this one today. Well, not today. I'm recording this about a week in advance. But I'm going to release this one, and in a few days, I will release the rest of this massive history of Star Wars video games. Because there's some more things that I really want to talk about, and I just can't cover it all in the amount of time that I have set forth for myself. So, and I know some of you guys don't watch it, but some of you guys do, and I want to make sure that I don't overextend my welcome in one video. So, thank you for watching. Please come back to the second part of this. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like or a comment. If not, you can always hit the thumbs down. I appreciate it. Any feedback is good feedback. So thank you for watching. Wish you all Godspeed. We will see you next time. It's Finite 13 signing off.